There is a private club on a barrier island off the coast of Georgia that most visitors walk past without asking a single question. It is called the Jekyll Island Club. It was founded in 1886. The main clubhouse is a sprawling, shingle-style structure with wide verandas, long dining halls, and polished wood interiors designed for America's wealthiest industrial families. On November 24, 1910, a Thanksgiving dinner was served inside that building, wild turkey with oyster stuffing. 6 men sat at that table. By the time they left the island, they had written the framework for a new American banking system. The federal government would later adopt it without publicly acknowledging where it came from. I found this because I was looking for something else entirely. I was tracing early 20th century banking reforms, trying to understand how financial crises shaped legislation between 1907 and 1913. The further I went into those records, the more I realised the story wasn't about reform, it was about authorship. Because the official story is simple. The Federal Reserve Act was passed in December 1913 to stabilise the American economy after repeated financial panics. It created a central banking system designed to prevent collapses, manage currency, and protect the public. But the authors of that system were never supposed to be known. And that leads to the first unanswered question. If the system was designed in the open, why was its drafting done in secret? The Jekyll Island Club still stands today. Visitors can walk through its dining rooms, its hallways, its grounds. There are no barriers, no restricted sections, no plaques explaining what happened there in November 1910. But one of the men who attended that meeting later described it. Frank Vanderlip was the president of National City Bank. In 1935, he published his autobiography, From Farm Boy to Financier. In it, he described the secrecy of that trip. Discovery, we knew, simply must not happen, he wrote, or else all our time and effort would be wasted. He was not describing a casual meeting. He was describing a coordinated effort to write a banking bill that would later be introduced to Congress. The men did not travel under their real names. They avoided public schedules. They left from different locations and converged quietly on the island. The official explanation for this secrecy comes from the Federal Reserve's own historical archive. The meeting was kept secret, they say, because knowledge of who wrote the plan could have influenced people's perception of the value of the ideas. The explanation is about perception, but Vanderlip's explanation is about passage. If it were to be exposed publicly, that bill would have no chance whatever of passage by Congress. Same event, 2 explanations. Only one of them comes from someone who was in the room. And that raises the next question. What exactly did they write? The bill that emerged from that meeting was originally associated with Senator Nelson Aldrich. It became known as the Aldrich Plan. Publicly, it failed. It was criticized. It was debated. It did not pass. But the structure of that plan did not disappear. Vanderlip again, writing in 1935, although the Aldrich Federal Reserve Plan was defeated when it bore the name Aldrich, nevertheless, its essential points were all contained in the plan that was finally adopted. Same structure, different name. 3 years later, in December 1913, Congress passed the Federal Reserve Act. The official version of events treats these as separate developments. But the record shows continuity, and this is where the story reaches its pivot. The official claim is that the Federal Reserve Act was a new solution created through public legislative process. The Aldrich Plan was rejected. The Federal Reserve Act was passed. but the record shows the essential structure remained the same. One plan was rejected under one name. The same plan passed under another. The gap between rejection and adoption was never explained. Now consider what happened to the dollar after 1913. In 1913, $1 held its full purchasing power. According to Bureau of Labor Statistics (CPI) data, that same dollar today is worth approximately 3.044 cents. That is a loss of 96.9% of its value. Over 113 years, the cumulative price increase reached approximately 3,185%. No single year accounts for it. No single policy explains it. But the trend is continuous. In 1913, $1 in present value, 0.64404, equivalent purchasing power, loss 96.9%. No official document attributes that change directly to the Federal Reserve Act, but no official explanation reconciles the scale of that change either. And while those numbers accumulate slowly over decades, one voice inside the system reacted immediately. Charles August Lindbergh Sr. was a Republican congressman from Minnesota's 6th District. He served from 1907 to 1970. On the day the Federal Reserve Act passed, he stood on the floor of Congress and gave a statement recorded in the Congressional Record, House, Volume 54. "This act establishes the most gigantic trust on earth," he said. "When the president signs this act, the invisible government by the money power will be legalized." He did not speak as an outsider. He was inside the legislative process. 4 years later, on February 12, 1917, Lindbergh introduced articles of impeachment against 5 members of the Federal Reserve Board. Those articles are preserved in the Congressional Record, pages 3126 to 3126 to 3130. They were filed. They were recorded. They were never acted upon. His warnings remained in the archive. They were never revisited in policy. And while those warnings were being recorded, something else was happening, quietly. And in parallel, now consider what else was happening in that same period. The Federal Reserve Act passes in December. At the same time, the system it creates is immediately insulated from full external review. Decades later, in 1978, Congress formally restricted the Government Accountability Office from auditing key aspects of monetary policy. Same system, same institution. One law creates it. Another law limits oversight of it. The official explanation describes independence. But independence from oversight is not neutral. It changes what can be verified, and that leads directly to the records that were not available. For decades, internal Federal Reserve meeting transcripts were not publicly acknowledged as being systematically collected. This changed in 1993. Representative Henry B. Gonzalez conducted inquiries that revealed transcripts of Federal Open Market Committee meetings had been recorded and stored. Even some committee members were reportedly unaware of the extent of those records. Critics stated the Federal Reserve had misled the public and Congress for many, many years. Those transcripts now exist, but they do not extend back to the beginning, and access is partial. Then, in 2011, the first comprehensive GAO audit report, GAO 11696, revealed something else. During the 2008 financial crisis, the Federal Reserve provided over $16 trillion in financial assistance to domestic and foreign institutions. This was done without prior congressional approval. The number is documented. The decision-making process behind it is only partially visible. The records exist, but not all of them are accessible. And by the time full disclosure becomes possible, the people who made those decisions will no longer be available to question. The impact of these decisions is not recorded in a single event. It is distributed. In 1913, $100 represented full purchasing power for a household. Today, that same amount holds less than $3.50 in equivalent value. There is no announcement attached to that change, no single date where it occurred, no memorial listing the families affected, but over generations, savings diminished, not through a single collapse, through gradual erosion. And because it happened slowly, it does not appear in a single record. It appears in the absence of value. The building is still there. The records are still there. The numbers are still there. But the authorship remains obscured. 6 men met in November 1910. They wrote a plan. That plan was publicly rejected. Then it was passed under a different name. The explanation for the secrecy focuses on perception. The explanation from the participant focuses on concealment. And those two explanations have never been reconciled. The Jekyll Island Club still stands in Georgia, open to the public. The Congressional Record Volume 54 is preserved in the Library of Congress. The GAO 11696 audit report is publicly downloadable. Frank Vanderlip's autobiography is still in circulation. What is missing is a complete, transparent record of how the Federal Reserve System was authored, who fully shaped it, and why its original drafting required secrecy to survive. The building is open. The documents are readable. The system is still in place, and the authors are still behind a closed door.